and thanks ODC for having me here. I'm going to talk about the history and the future of machine learning, and hopefully give you guys some lessons that'll be probably useful. A little bit about me. So I grew up in India, and then I moved to the United States about like 12 years back. Came for my master's, went to Purdue University, and then spent a little over 8 years at Microsoft. There I worked on a bunch of different things, compilers, big data connecting tools, and most notably, I was an engineering manager for the team called Power BI, and it's a business intelligence tool, and scaled it up from 0 to 5 million subscribers over a period of 3 years. And here in Reddit, I've been there for about roughly 2 years, and I worked on a bunch of different things. When I first joined Reddit, I led their web platform initiative, and if you guys are familiar with Reddit, we just went through a big desktop redesign, the website redesign, so I led that effort, and also shipped the native video platform. In the last 4 or 5 months, I've been leading this group called the Knowledge Group at Reddit, and it's primarily focused on AI, machine learning, search, discovery, news, and a bunch of other different initiatives, which is all powering our AI platform. So quick poll, how many of you use Reddit frequently? Okay, that's quite a few users. That's awesome. For folks who don't use Reddit, I just want to give a brief overview of what Reddit is. Reddit is a network of communities, and the way we think of at Reddit is it's a place where you can find people with similar passion and interest where you can converse with them, right? You could be a fan of like sneakers or like sports or football. You can find tens and hundreds of thousands of users who are as passionate as you are in the topic, right? Even for people who use Reddit, they don't know how big Reddit is by their numbers. So if you're familiar with Alexa, which ranks the website by the user engagement, and Reddit is at number 5 in the US and number 14 across the globe. And we have about like 313 million monthly active users and close to 140,000 active communities, and about 12 million posts per month, 96 comments per month, and 2 billion votes per month. TLDR, we have a shit ton of data. So the mission for Reddit is bringing community and belonging to everyone, right? So how does Reddit work, right? Reddit has like 4 interesting things that uniquely comes together to provide like really engaging content, right? The first one is pseudonymous account. Reddit is a place where you don't need to use your real identity, which makes people to have real authentic conversations, it's not worrying about what to say. And the second one is Reddit has communities and rules. So it's not a place where you can come and do whatever you want. If you want to be part of Reddit, you need to follow the rules. So we have communities specifically around videos, around sports. Then if you want to participate in those communities, follow those rules. And we have voting to some other platforms. And even if you come to Reddit when you don't have any passions or interests, we have this hot front page, which enables people to start immediately interacting with the content, which is like the topmost content in the internet right now. So all these 4 things come together in a very interesting fashion, and it provides endless curation of addictive content. We think of Reddit as a weaponized procrastination tool. And here, we are here to destroy world's productivity. So you might ask, what are we doing with all this power? Okay, so let me show it to you, and tell me if you don't like it. There's a cat fist bumping a human. So we had about like close to 1 million views and a ton of votes. And this one is like a cat literally walking a human being. So we'll admit, like, Reddit is a lot of cat pictures and interesting memes. But give me a minute. I'll try to show it's not just only about the cat pictures, right? So people come to Reddit just to have fun, just enjoy memes, enjoy cat pictures. They also come here, to have conversations which are life-changing. For example, this gentleman, Throwaway 2389, he talks about how he met his wife and he tricked into marrying her. So it's a platform where they can have real conversations. And Reddit, the community coordinates for a greater impact. This is an example of Kayla Davis, who went to r/assistance and was able to find a kidney donor. And it took I think, a few months to a year for her to find our kidney donor. But Reddit can also get together to have a broader community impact, right? So with so much content, right? Like we have memes, cat pictures, confessions, communities coming along to make a change in the world. What is the interesting problem that we've been trying to solve the last few years is like, how do you find the relevant content for these users, right? So you might just say like, hey, can you have like a simplified onboarding? It kind of gets harder when you have like a million different types of users, but each one having their unique experiences. I thought it would be interesting to show you guys some historical context on Reddit and where we started with our machine learning efforts. So Reddit, for people who don't know, it was launched in 2005. It was originally built as a competitor for Delicious. I don't know how many of you guys remember Delicious. It was just a place for bookmarking URLs. It kind of started off there. Right now, Reddit has like close to 100 million comments per day. But when we initially started, like commenting was not even in the site, right? And we introduced communities and subreddits in 2007 and 2008. I'll tell you why we actually had to do that. This is what the site looked like in 2006. We kind of thought about it, like the original founders and the founding engineer thought about like having this recommended tab, which based on the people's interaction and interest, they were going to personalize the home feed. So in 2006, first what they tried was they used a collaboration filter. You would think like, if a bunch of people are upvoting and downvoting content similar to you, so if we can find the similarity, then we can show content that they're consuming to you. So that was kind of our initial thinking. So what we went and did was built a matrix of all the upvotes and downvotes and tried to apply the SVD, single value decomposition, to find like interesting patterns to do it. But that didn't quite work. Turns out like our median upvote at that time was like very close to 1. And most of the users saw the similar friend page, so we couldn't make any interesting patterns out of it. This is kind of a feedback that we got like about 9 years back. People saying, "Hey, your recommended feature sucks. It doesn't do anything." So it was a really good, encouraging feedback at that time. We tried to solve the recommendation problem, but that didn't quite work. Remember I said like we have this hot friend page where like we get like millions of people. So it was interesting for spammers and like bots to bring their post up to the friend page. So what they tried to create was like a bunch of bot accounts tried to go and upvote and upvote content that they wanted to bring it to the friend page. So the collaboration filter that we built to find recommendation actually helped us solving this vote cheating. So this is what like visually representing it. So you see the islands of correlated users, and the silos are the ones, the bots or the cheating accounts. And the mean response voting at the center shows like the things happening on the front page. So we started off with trying to use upvotes and downvotes. That didn't quite work, but it kind of worked out for our anti-evil. We call it the anti-evil effort, like how do we prevent bots taking over. So then we decided to switch over to get the humans to do the hard part. That's when in around 2007 and 2008, we went and introduced subreddits, or as we call it now, communities. So Reddit, instead of being one place where you can create a ton of content, now it started becoming like subreddits where you can have pockets of information. So this is like a visualization from last year showing the way different communities interact with each other, because in Reddit you can cross-post across communities. So now that we started doing subreddits and tried a different initiative, one of the important things that we realized is like in any place when you want to use machine learning algorithm, it's really, really important to have your data in a really good state. So we had to go get our data pipeline in place. So this is what like the data pipeline looked pre-2014. If you guys remember, like Reddit was sold in 2009, and there wasn't much development that happened for like 5 years in the new management, but users kept on coming. So this, like, we didn't have much changes in the site at that time. So here we have a simple map reduce, processing your logs every day. Nothing really interesting in terms of the ML stuff. In 2014, we introduced Kafka collectors, which dumped data into S3, and then we used Hive for the jobs, nightly jobs. And the way the setup was done is like we had ad hoc queries. Whenever the executive team or the board asked, like, how many users do you guys have? Then we went and did it over a weekend or like a week, trying to understand what our usages are. So it wasn't kind of real time, but we had all the data that we needed. And then we added the Midas enrichment layer. Enrichment is basically trying to collect interesting signals and make the data much more interesting to view. Like a couple of things we tried to do there was like geolocation, like based on the IP address, where is the user coming from, what kind of browser are they using. And so around 2016, 17 is when things got interesting for ML. So we introduced the Minsky ML recommendation service, which basically looks at the user interactions and pulls in data. And then we started using ETL jobs to collect insights and then use it in our product recommend feeds, right? And last year is when we made a big change in our data pipeline and moved to BigQuery. With BigQuery, it was like really transformative. Like it was really simple to manage. We had a much faster query performance, and we didn't it was pretty simple to connect like a bunch of BI tools, like the one Mode Analytics, Power BI. Analytics is an in-house built tool. So it was pretty useful, and like we're super happy with the bet that we took on BigQuery. And the other important thing was like bringing a data culture into Reddit, right? It's like when you're thinking about using ML, it was really, really important to understand most of your decision, or almost all your decisions, what do you want to invest in, which areas you don't want to invest in, has to come through data. So this is an example of a dashboard that we built, which the users are coming in real time. And when I had to build the redesign, I used this dashboard to understand how many users are coming in, what kind of patterns they follow. So if you guys thinking about using machine learning or having a data pipeline, it's really, really important to bring the data culture into your company. Right. So we kind of looked at what we tried like in early years, and we kind of talked about like what is the data pipeline looks like right now. So I just want to walk you guys through a few experiments that we ran. So the first one we tried was looking at user behavior, right? Like we used a Jaccard similarity algorithm on subreddits and try to see if we can come up with some interesting insights on how to recommend posts for the users. We ran into a couple of problems. The first problem was like we had a lot of subreddits. We have about like close to 1 million subreddits, and this algorithm was an O of n square. It wasn't really efficient. And remember I said like we used to have this thing called the hot friend page, which the way we did that was like we recommended default subreddits for every new user who came to Reddit. So we had like about 50 default subreddits. So that was kind of shadowing all the other patterns that was emerging from this. So now that we have the data in BigQuery, and we had a kind of an aha moment, like, okay, now do we really want to look at the user interactions, or can we try something else? So we went and looked at our subreddits. We have a ton of content, like posts, comments. So what we tried to do was we took all of the comments within a subreddit, run it through the doc2vec, and created a three-dimensional vector to define these subreddits to find similarities within subreddits. So we kind of we were able to build this tool, which kind of you can play with the subreddits like algebra, right? Like you have r/chromosomes, which is about like a community around women, and then we had a community around gamers. So if you put in like r/chromosomes plus r/gamers, the output of the tool we built was like girl gamers. So it was able to understand like the patterns that the users were interacting with. So that was kind of our next step into how onboarding could have been better for these users. So we had a cartographer, which is like a real job at Reddit. It's kind of a mix between a librarian and a data analyst. And they went and looked through our content and tried to, or subreddits, and tried to combine them into interesting categories. So we have a bunch of categories around health, gaming, cities, or sports teams. So when people come to Reddit right now, you can select which areas you're interested in, and based on that, we recommend a bunch of subreddits that you might be interested. So far, we've been using subreddits and like the voting patterns. And for about 12 years, like our home feed, so we've been looking at the similarity of this subreddits, like I mentioned. So if you provide a subreddit like Indiana, it knows, okay, this is a state in US, and it recommends similar subreddits like Ohio, Arkansas. Or if you provide a college football team, it recommends other college football teams. So using the Dr. Vec, we've been able to build this knowledge graph to understand how the different communities are similar and how do they interact with each other. So this is what I was kind of giving a heads up. Like, so far we've been looking at user interactions and the community similarity, and the home feed was never touched. It's been the same for the last kind of 12 years. So we thought, okay, that is kind of interesting. We have an interesting onboarding. It's time to go look at how do you make improvements to the home feeds. So this is when we started using large-scale logistic regression models. And some of the features that we used is like on time of the day that the user is coming and visiting it, what kind of subreddit they visiting, or what are the user interests. And so we have a really large data set. Like we have 10 terabyte of data set, training data, but 50 million features and 5 million parameters that we want to do. At any time in Reddit, like we have at least 5 different models that we're experimenting to try to see which one brings out the best of Reddit for the users. Right. The other thing that we, how am I doing on time? Okay. The other thing we tried was, if you think about Reddit, we thought about, okay, can we build a rabbit hole inside Reddit? Like a user comes to Reddit, and they go see a post around something they like, cat pictures, right? Then we can recommend them like, hey, here are some of the similar posts that are talking about like cats or interesting things. So this is what kind of an initial prototype we did. So this one is talking about skiing. On the side, we recommended a few other posts, which is talking about skiing classes and lessons, kind of related, but not exactly the same content. And I'll talk about why this is kind of important on how we do the experiments and what metrics we looked at it so that we don't kind of show them the similar content that they get bored of the site. Right? So these were like a bunch of different experiments that we ran. And we learned a ton on what we had to do. So I'll take the logistic regressions as a case study and then walk through some of the lessons that we learned. The first one is around modeling. Like I said, like we have a huge data set. Like we have a ton of features, and what we tried to do was like kind of we went with an approach of kitchen sink model. We tried to put a lot of features in, and it just was really hard to come up with some clear winners on what works and what doesn't work, right? And then the way we used the objective functions, sometimes it wasn't we picked objective functions that was not the right one for our business. So the lessons learned there was like start something simple. Don't try to put in all the features there. And in the case of Reddit, we tried to use CTR as an objective function. That wasn't quite interesting because people are just opening links. So we tried to come up with something which was more meaningful for Reddit. On the training side, as I mentioned, like we have about 5 experiments that are running on average almost every day at Reddit. And it was really, really important to have the iterations on different models to be really quick. When we started, it took us about, I would say, like a couple of months to train a model and try to run an experiment on it. So it took a long time for us to get to a point. But right now, we can create a new model within a half a week and have like multiple experiments running in like a week, right? We still use a bunch of features. And the last part is on the serving side. What we have noticed is like we ran into a lot of problems because of the way our infrastructure was set up using different technologies. Like we had like really, really dumb bugs. Like it wasn't like case sensitive. Like on the training side, we had the subreddit's name, which was alpha, like capitalized. On the serving side, it was not capitalized. So like we ran into a bunch of simple bugs. And so we learned a lot of interesting lessons, which made us change our infrastructure. And I'll show you like what it's going to look like in the coming months. That's a very high-level overview of what the lessons we learned by just doing different experiments and running. And one of the most important things for Reddit was it wasn't about just getting people addicted to the site. It was more about showing them more engaging content and things that are interesting. So the couple of ways we measure that is like time spent on Reddit, right? Like we have our own experimentation platform, which takes in a control group and then a bunch of different control groups and the experiments that we're running. And then we have flexibility of running it on like, okay, by this geolocation or by this user type, not user type, by the day of the time we're running it. And we try to measure it in a way that like it makes sense for us. So time on site is pretty good. Like when we used the latest ML models, it was kind of going in the right direction. And the important metric that we tried to do was, this is showing that the time on site was moving up for all type of users, right? Like when you look at the results are showing the 90th percentile and the 10th percentile over spread across different percentile groups. And we could see that the usage was going across for all types of users at Reddit. It wasn't important for us to just change it for like a specific cohort of users because the 90th percentile are the people who keep coming back to Reddit every single day. The 10th percentile is the people who come in like very occasionally and what they want to do. And this helped us understand like, okay, we are showing content that are really relevant for people. And the last piece that we use for measurement is like retention. Because remember the Reddit rabbit hole that we're talking about. If you just keep showing the same content, at some point you get bored of it, right? It's kind of important to keep an eye out for users' behavior. And the way we do that is by looking at our retention. So with the ML models that we talked about, the retentions have been going up pretty consistently. So that's kind of like a history, lessons learned, and how we use our experimentation platform. What's coming up next? So we're still focusing our initiatives around making the home feed more relevant by doing personalized models, by looking at the time on site and kind of what kind of activity the users are doing. And then we are also with a bunch of lessons that we learned from using the infrastructure, we're moving into this model called the streaming infrastructure, where we don't have to rely on an ETL job or a nightly job to come back and show something else, right? Like if you come and interact with the site to Reddit today, you subscribe to a community, you don't see any real-time changes on your home feed. So we're moving towards a streaming infrastructure where we can take in user interactions and signals to provide much more relevant content. And the last one, based on some of the casing examples that I showed with the lessons learned, we have moved to TensorFlow models for serving our new ML models, and we shipped a new version of the popular feed, I would say last month, October, mid-October-ish, and this is showing the results from that test. That particular test was specifically around optimizing the feed around interest or meaningful discussions. Like if you go to before October, when you went to Reddit, you could see a lot of memes and images. So we kind of did a test with across 40 different types of variants, and what we landed on was if you show interesting discussions, people tend to come back to Reddit a lot more. So that's one thing we shipped a couple of weeks back. So with that, thank you for spending the last 30 minutes with me, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Anand. And we're going to have a questions. Yeah?
That's a great question. The question is, when you're building engagement models, how do you validate the user's behavior not changing in a particular direction? Okay. So the way we do that is we have our, we call it the guardrail metrics. We have metrics like I talked about, time on sign, retention. Those are the metrics, those are the output metrics for the specific experiments that you're running. And we have these guardrail metrics. For us, it's more the number of posts, number of comments, and the number of comments in a particular subreddit, right? Like we look at that as an like a guardrail metric. And any experiments we run, even if we get like an insane result, like for example, we had a experiment that we did, like where the time on site went incredible, like almost doubled, but our retention wasn't that good. So it kind of showed us a pattern that like, oh, this is like really interesting content. People like, it's like kind of a drug. You just go in there for a while and then you just withdraw from it. So we look at, the short answer for you is like we define the guardrail metrics that are interesting for your company and then make sure you validate your test before you move on to the next one. Okay, the question is, do we do anything for logged out users? Yes, so like the experiment that I just mentioned, yeah, this one, it's around the popular feed. So popular feed is the feed that when any Redditor who comes to the site, they don't have a logged in account, that's the site they go in, right? So the personalization or the optimization is done looking at all like the full set of users, not based on what that specific user does.
You talked a lot about trying to optimize like retention or engagement. Are there other types of machine learning that you're doing with the content that you have?
I can just briefly talk about it, but I don't have the full details. Like one of the biggest things we do around machine learning is our, we call it the trust and safety and anti-evil team, which basically looks at bad actors on Reddit, right? It could be bots, it could be fake accounts. It could be. So one of the other things is like with Reddit being an anonymous site, like when you can have authentic conversations, people can like there could be a harassment, right? We kind of use machine learning to detect those things and do it. And that's a different team. It's called the anti-evil team at Reddit.
How does your effort support search, the subreddit search, or the advertising platform?
What about the search and the advertising platform?
So how do you use machine learning in those?
Okay. So the question is, how do we use machine learning in advertising platform and the search engine? I can talk about the search engine. That's the team I run. On ads, I need to follow up on someone. On the search side, the way we use it, we use LucidWorks primarily for our search indexing, and then we do a lot of tweaking around the relevance models around LucidWorks. So we're kind of in an early stages for search. So taking a step back, like talking about search, like if you guys remember, like a year back, if you go to Reddit and you try to search on something, it's like almost like going to Vegas and trying to gamble. It's like 50-50 odds the search will actually work. And when we moved into BigQuery, that's when we started working on an entirely new search platform, and we have that really, really functional. One of the interesting things that we are actually doing with search, I'll probably get in trouble saying this here, but I'll still say it. We are trying to look at interesting search terms, like trending queries is one example that we just launched it in our iOS app, right? Like users are coming and searching for a specific type of query. And then we look at that, and if you see a pattern emerge, then we show it in a zero search page experience. Right? If you go to a new user comes in, uses our iOS app, he just goes to the search tab, he sees a bunch of trending queries. So that's like the way we detect those trending queries is like using machine learning. Like it's kind of rudimentary now, like when we are looking at what terms are getting more more upward trending, but we are trying to bring in interesting things like key value terms. If you guys remember, like in one of the history slides I talked about, we did the subreddit similarities and we used Dr. One of the things we use there is the key value terms. Like when you look at the post, there's a lot of words. We always try to identify the interesting terms that have been discussed, like ignore all the normal words. So we use kind of different approaches on the search. Yeah. Okay.
How has the post and comment ranking evolved in Reddit?
As far as I can say, I don't think that has changed significantly. Like the post, the hot, like it's some, like literally I had a dinner with our CEO Steve Estrie, and some of the sorting code was written like way back. We haven't touched some of the core of Reddit yet. Any other? I think I saw a hand go up there.
When you guys roll out in the algorithms, do you do it like all at once, or do you do A/B tests, and like what sort of metrics do you track?
Sure. The question is, when we roll out experiments, what kind of metrics do we track? Do we do a A/B test? So yes, we definitely do A/B tests, and this shows. I didn't put the labels in because it actually shows the actual time on site. But each one of these groups are different variants, right? Like this for this particular experiment, the winning variant is all the way at the left, which we show interesting discussions on the popular feed. And some of these are different variants we tried with different percentages and how we mix the content. And we also have a control group, right? Like even when we launch an experiment, we always hold out. We have this holdout group, so we kind of hold it out for like some like long term to understand what are the long term efforts that we should keep an eye out for. So on the redesign, we still have an holdout group for about, I want to say like 3% or like some percentage of the users. So they still get the old website because we want to look at the long-term effort of redesign. Like we started shipping the redesign in the March of this year, and those people are still getting the old website. So one more. And what kind of metrics do we track? It totally depends on what feature you're trying to ship. But like almost all the experiments at Reddit has a guardrail metrics. Like some of the things I can highlight are number of posts, number of comments, like number of subscription events. Like the core of Reddit is like posting, voting, commenting, and subscription. We want to keep those as our guardrail metrics.
What work is being done in machine learning to understand the societal impact?
So the question is like, what do we do around toxicity analysis using the ML1? Okay, I'll probably follow up with you offline. I can give you like a brief answer. Like what we do is even in the popular feed, like we have a set of like filters. Like we have quarantine websites and like blacklist subreddits which don't come to the popular feed even when the like engagement is really high. So we have our own set of blacklist, if you may, or like a whitelist or a quarantine list. So, sure, man.
I suggest time on site's not the right measure to optimize for because you've already ruined my life.
Hey, I wasn't joking when I said you're trying to build a weaponized procrastination tool.
Are there other metrics do you have more personalized optimization metrics? Like some people are looking to find a piece of knowledge, some people are looking to be entertained, some people are looking to have a discussion. Do you think about optimizing for different objectives, for example?
Yeah. So the question is like, how do we optimize for different types of user cohorts, right? So like, I think I want to say like a few months back or 3-4 months back, like the way most of the things work at Reddit is like, most of these things, it's like we use our platform to get the details from them, right? Like when the way we ship the redesign, we had to go back to our community, get a lot of feedback, iterate, and do those things. To what we're calling it the archetype. right? Like we reached out to a bunch of moderators around Reddit who moderate these subreddits and asked them like, what kind of a community is yours? Is this like is this around gaming? Is this around discussing events? Is this around interests? Is this around hobbies? And then we defined about like 8 to 10 different types of archetypes. So that's data that we just collected, and it kind of gets interesting. The only meaningful metric that we have on Reddit is because of the way our site is set up. We don't know anything about the users. Like we try to understand what the types of communities are. We call it the archetypes, and then based on those archetypes, we try to see different patterns. For example, if you are into NFL, the usage pattern for that community is very, very predictable. Thursday nights, Sunday, and Monday nights, right? Like that's when you see the people coming and engaging on the site. So we try to understand what kind of category or the community type is, and we optimize for that and less on the user, because all we know about the user is like, okay, this person is logging in from this particular site, and it could be anyone in this room. So.
It seems like we don't have any more questions. So thank you guys for all the questions, and let's thank our great speaker for a very interesting talk.
Thanks, guys.